hang on a minute. That's better, isn't it? Sorry, can't see from here. If you're lined up square, then you can't see the red dot. We're not expecting a fire alarm to sound, but if it does, can you go to the doors at the back and then out through reception and into the car park? Can I also remind you to put your mobiles and devices on silent? And if you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you raise your hand, and John will make a note of those wishing to speak, and then I'll offer you the opportunity to do so. So can we move on then to the first item, which are apologies for absence. Trina, who do we have?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence we've received from Councillor Bowkett, and we've also received from Sir Andrew Cash for this meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Declarations of members' interest. Does anybody have any interests they wish to declare? No. We'll move on to item 3, which are the minutes from the meeting held on the 14th of June 2022. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of September 2022, pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack as a correct record. Is there a proposer? Was there anybody here? Thank you, John. And a seconder? Thank you, Rob.
All in favour, Chairman.
All in favour?
Please raise your hands.
Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. And then the action updates, that's the minutes agreed. The action updates on item 4 are just for noting, and can I just ask that you all agree with a show of hands, please? Thank you. Do I have to do any against? Right, okay. Moving on to agenda item 5, and I should have probably said at the very beginning that my expectation is that everybody's read the paper, so I'm not going to laboriously go through everything in detail. You'll see the chairman's announcements there. Just would add to that between them being printed and today, just to update you that I am part of NHS Confed's offer to ICS chairman, ICP chairman and ICB chairman for a piece of work getting together all over the country, the 43 systems, I think it is, and that we meet on a very regular basis, but the advantage of that is that that ability to swap notes between chairmen is exceedingly useful, and certainly from a personal point of view, the opportunity to give local government views, or at least Lincolnshire local government views might be more accurate, is I'm taking full advantage of. And of course, one of those ICS chairs is indeed Patricia Hewitt, who you will know that recently has been asked to do a particular piece of work by the Secretary of State on ICSs. And I think there is, and I've got my fingers crossed, that there is a view that the ICS system should have more power devolved to it at a local level. So I do hope that Patricia comes up with the right form of words to progress that. Can we then move on to item 6A, which is the Adult Social Care Discharge Fund, and an update on the Lincolnshire Better Care Fund. Before I go any further, I'm just going to apologise to you, but I think you know about it. The Discharge Fund paper came out late. There was no way that we could avoid that because government didn't put it out until late. So we wanted to make sure that you had sight of it today, and it just meant that rather than it coming in the pack, it was a few days later. So if I can now hand over to Glenn to report on this item and then invite you to ask any questions if necessary. Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper seeks to cover 3 items. The first is an update regarding the 22-23 BCF plan for Lincolnshire. And the second is a proposed reporting template to come to Health and Wellbeing Board on a quarterly basis as and when the board meets. That is Appendix A in your report pack. And then the third element relates to what Councillor Woolley has just referred to, which was the announcement on the 21st of November by the Department of Health for £500 million planned for patients, which in Lincolnshire, as the report indicates, represents some £4.9 million thereabouts of funding to be allocated this financial year to support acute flow and also discharge in Lincolnshire. So there are 3 elements to this. I'm joined by colleagues Pam Clipson and Nikita Lord for any questions and support as necessary. With respect to the first item, we have been given encouraging news from the region, which indicates that our BCF plan for 22-23 has been recommended for approval, but as yet we do not have formal sign-off by government. As to the reporting template, I think, as you say, Chair, colleagues will have read the report. Happy to take any questions on that, but you should note that the reporting template includes all the required BCF metrics. If members of the board wish to go further, that's entirely within your gift. The third thing, and possibly the most material for today, is your support for the joint discharge fund proposals, that is from the Integrated Care Board and the County Council, for the spend against the national requirements. And I should say that the government reporting template will be coming into being so that the first report goes back to government on the 30th of December and subsequent reports are every fortnight. So you'll appreciate, Chair, just the pace with which we're having to move with this, as is every other system. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, straight over to questions. Any questions from anyone? Andrew.
Not a question, Chair, a comment and a commendation, actually, about the discharge fund. As you would expect, I have an interest to declare on the topic. Warmly welcome any funding that goes into this. And as I keep reminding people at the moment, if you go back to the CQC's annual sort of state of care report, the very first line of that document, and I've written it down, says that in 2022, the health and care system is gridlocked, unable to operate effectively. From where I sit, I absolutely endorse that statement. So anything that we can do between us, recognising we are all on the same side on this, anything we can do to help acute flow, I warmly welcome. So commend the 4.9 million to us all. Let's get on with it. Let's have the maximum impact on it and continue to work together to improve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And whilst I may, can I thank both health colleagues and indeed local government colleagues for the speed at which you've brought this all together. It's really great, and I'm sure somebody didn't get much of a weekend. So, John.
Thanks, Sue. And just building on Andrew's point, really, teams across social care and health have come together really quickly around all this. I think we've reached agreement really quickly as well as an absolute commonality of purpose. And clearly now I think the imperative is to as Andrew said, we crack on and get this implemented toot sweet. Just to also say that for non-NHS colleagues, whilst this is money that's been allocated to the ICB for sort of formal sign-off, the way we've developed it in the NHS is sort of a collective across all of our sort of operational leads within the trusts and primary care, as well as the ICBs. So there's a sort of a broad NHS position as well as an ICB position. And I think just to note, whilst there's emergency over this now, as we will be stepping into 23-24, this actually increases, doesn't it, Glenn? I think it goes up from £500 million nationally to £1 billion nationally. So, you know, there'll be more to come in fairly short order in terms of the sort of more medium-term direction of this stuff. But again, I completely commend this, and let's just crack on and get this stuff implemented as quickly as possible, please, colleagues.
Any other questions? Okay, on that note, shall we move straight to the recommendations then? Unless anybody has any strong objections, I suggest that we do all three in one go. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Sue. Councillor Rawlins, thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. All in favour? Is there anyone against? Are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you, that's agreed. We move on to item 7A, which is the JSNA for 2023, an update on the review of process. I'm going to ask Lucy Gavins, who is one of our consultants in public health, to present the report, and then any questions to follow. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Councillor Woolley. The Health and Care Act places a joint responsibility on upper tier local authorities and the Integrated Care Board to prepare and publish a joint strategic needs assessment through the Health and Wellbeing Board, and to use that needs assessment to inform decision making, commissioning of services, and the development of our joint health and wellbeing strategy. Effectively, the JSNA provides the evidence base, if you like, for the health and wellbeing needs of our local population. In June 2021, the board agreed proposals to move to a life course approach, which includes a start well, live well, and age well kind of section within our joint strategic needs assessment. And each of those life course stages includes a number of narrative fact sheets that detail the current picture in Lincolnshire in terms of local need, local response in terms of the services and the support that we have on offer, as well as identifying gaps in our current understanding and next steps for each area of focus. And the full list of topics can be found in Appendix A. Those narrative fact sheets will ultimately be presented online through a new portal that will also provide an interactive data dashboard, so that the data will update automatically. This is quite a big change from it's a significant development from our previous joint strategic needs assessment, which was kind of based in it was kind of narratives that included the data within. Moving forwards, it will update automatically and sit alongside, which will be much more interactive and will save considerable officer time in terms of refreshing and processing data sets. The new platform will kind of create insights to support evidence-informed decision-making at a scale beyond that which is currently possible. Today, I'm just presenting a bit of an update really to the Health and Wellbeing Board, asking you to note our progress, and we would like to come back in the spring to present the new online portal at the next Health and Wellbeing Board meeting. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Derek, sorry, I jumped in and offered Lucy the opportunity to speak. Would you like to say anything?
Only by way of context very quickly, which is that we've got the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, which I'm sure everybody's aware of, and Lucy's just given an update. The next paper is about the Health and Wellbeing Strategy and a proposal to update that. And then when we stop being the Health and Wellbeing Board and become the Integrated Care Partnership, there's the Integrated Care Partnership draft report strategy there as well. And I think the three should be seen together really, with the ideally the JSNA as the underpinning evidence base for us, and then the two strategies fitted together. So just to give people a bit of context, that's sort of how they fit together in my head. The who and the what and the how we'll get into. But just a bit of context, much easier in Lincolnshire than it is in other parts of the country where there's lots of different geographies. So that was all I was going to say. I think Lucy's covered the JSNA update as well.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? John?
Thank you, Sue. So it was at the beginning of November, wasn't it, that we, many, not all, but many of us met in the New Life Centre in Sleaford to do some, I think, quite good deep thinking about how we were going to be taking forward the integrated care approach across Lincolnshire. And that meeting started, Derek, didn't it, with Andy doing the presentation to us all on the health of the people of Lincolnshire, which obviously you'd shared with the ICB board the day before as well. So I think I'm right in saying that all of that information that Andy presented, and obviously you presented as well, Derek, was based on our previous JSNA with some updates along the way. But it'd be helpful if you could sort of animate that a bit for us. I've, in my mind, got the sense that the JSNA is more of a rolling programme now, rather than a sort of an event as such that happens every few years. So have I got that right? And is there anything that you're in anticipation that you and Andy presented recently is going to, how can I put it, materially change as the process that Lucy's described sort of rolls forward from here? Thanks, Derek.
So I'll have a go at answering that, and then Lucy will correct me. I think the way I'd describe it is the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will be two things. It will be the data and intelligence that anybody in the partnership, anybody in the country can use so that they understand the health and need requirements across Lincolnshire. And then there'll be the narrative description of what that means, but what we're changing to is a life course approach. So it'll be sort of the start well, children, young people, adults, older adults, and end of life sort of model as described there. That narrative is just one way to use the data to describe the health and care requirements of the people of Lincolnshire. What I presented to the Integrated Care Board, and Andy did to that meeting, was another way to present that data. There are infinite ways that we could look at those data and describe. We could describe a discharge pathway, what happens outside of the hospital setting and why people go back into the hospital, for example. So the intelligence and data is there. How we use it to describe the experience of the people of Lincolnshire is up to us to use. The standard approach we will have in the JSNA is a life course approach, because in the conversation that we had earlier in the year, it fits more clearly with, for example, children and young people. So Heather's responsibilities and the overlap with schools nurseries and schools being a really important place that we support people. And then with older adults, it's more around GPs and therefore the primary care networks will be important. And with adults, it's often a mix of places. Could be schools, a way to engage with parents who maybe are out of employment, or it could be workplaces. So just different ways to cut it, really, to tell the story differently. But the underlying intelligence will be there for everybody to use. And of course, as a public health division, we've got a strong public health intelligence function that supports the system. And we've got population health management within the ICB developing as well.
Anything you'd like to add, Lucy?
Yeah, I was just quickly going to add that you're absolutely right. It will be more rolling. So the data in the dashboard will update as and when the sources of data that feed it are updated automatically. Similarly, there are sections in the fact sheets around national policy and strategy, which we will need to keep an eye on and make sure that they're updated. And I suppose most obviously there are next steps in each fact sheet, and as each area of work delivers against those current next steps, it will have to think about what its next steps are. So I think it will absolutely be a much more kind of interactive rolling tool, if you like, to use alongside things like population health management. So.
Okay, John? Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions? In that case, can we move on to note the progress of the JSNA review, note the next stages of the process, and agree to receive further reports and a presentation at the meeting in March to sign off the new JSNA ahead of the online resource going live? Can I have a show of hands in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's agreed. We now move on to item 7B, which is the refresh of the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy. And I'm going to invite Alison to present the report, and then again, if there's any questions from you. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. As Derek mentioned, the other side to the JSNA is the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. Is the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy. There's too many joints. Our current Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy was agreed and published in June of 2018. And at the time, we were going to do quite a bit of development around that, but obviously COVID happened. So a lot of that work was put on hold. So alongside developing the interim integrated care partnership strategy, we want to reinvigorate the joint health and wellbeing strategy, because as we've previously reported to the board, we're looking at that as being the what, the joint health and wellbeing strategy as being the what, and then the ICP strategy being the how. So we've done some work just to refresh some of the language and the context in the joint health and wellbeing strategy to make sure it's up to date and current and reflects the fact that we've now got the Health and Care Act of 2022, and to reflect the fact that we now have obviously the integrated care system in place. So a copy of the refreshed strategy is attached in Appendix A, and the intent is that as the JSNA is republished in March of next year, alongside the further development of the integrated care strategy, is to review the joint health and wellbeing strategy as well, and just to make sure that the strategy still is relevant based on the new JSNA. So I say that a copy of the refreshed strategy is there. We also wanted, pre-COVID, we were looking at putting in place some more rigorous governance around the joint health and wellbeing strategy, and wanting to move to things like themed meetings. So we want to reinvigorate that idea, and the proposal set out on page 28 and 29 is that we want to put in place a rolling 12 to 18 month forward plan. So we're quite clear about what's coming to the Health and Wellbeing Board, and then what's been reported to the Integrated Care Partnership, so that we avoid any duplication and overlap. So that the programme that's attached in the forward plan, that's a paper later on in the pack, is based on conversations we've had with each of the leads around the joint health and wellbeing strategy, to when would be appropriate time to do some of that reporting. So we put a proposal there around a rolling forward plan. And we'd also like to continue to produce an annual report which would come to the board at the AGM in June. As part of those conversations, we've looked again at the governance and the delivery governance around the joint health and wellbeing strategy, and that's set out in Appendix B. So there's 3 of the themes now, the 2 mental health themes and the dementia theme, are now going to sit under one sort of partnership group, and we're looking to reinvigorate some of the governance around the other delivery groups. So, and then further plans are going to be set out in March around what the programme of development is going to be next year in terms of updating the actual strategy, doing a more fundamental review of it.
Okay. Thank you, Alison. Any questions from anyone? Maz.
Thank you. Just an observation. So I'm just looking at the pictures, and I just wonder if we could just be a little bit more broader in capturing all demographics on some of the artwork, I think, to be much more inclusive. Thank you.
Absolutely. This is just a refresh of what we've got at the moment, but certainly as part of what we're doing next year, we can look at that. Absolutely, yes.
Derek.
Just picking up on that point from us, I think it's really important, but I think it flips into be really, really good, and I'm sure Alison will have this on her to-do list, if the refresh and the approach we take to a new health and wellbeing strategy is a much broader partnership-based approach, and we can get, you know, experts from comms from your team, Maz, to help us with things like that, because that way it'll be a proper health and wellbeing strategy at a partnership level, rather than just driven. And we had really good engagement last time, but a co-produced, co-owned sort of document would be ideal. So it's a bit of a marker in the sand for that. That'd be great.
Thank you, Derek. Any other questions? John.
Sorry, sir, I know I'm raising a few this afternoon. This is really good and I like it. I think when it comes to getting to the point of communicating with the public, and I was looking at the communication bit as well as the document, Alison, clearly there'll be, a lot of us in our organisations will be interested in looking at this in some depth, but more thinking about what we specifically want to communicate to the people of Lincolnshire about the priorities. And again, thinking about the session we had a month or so ago now, things like the level of obesity in our school children, things like the level of diabetes in the population, levels of smoking in the general population, and some parts pregnant ladies within that. There were probably half a dozen, the number of people who are of working age but aren't able to work because of MSK, musculoskeletal conditions. I mean, Lincolnshire is way off the sort of national averages in relation to this. So as well as, all of the stuff that's in here, which I really like, I think there might be something about a small number of almost really high level but key sort of bits of information that we want to sort of share, really push openly across the public domain in the county. And there might be some other sort of nuances to that as well, because I don't know the extent to which the people of Lincolnshire have a full understanding of some of these and how significant they're affecting health for individuals, families, and the communities that we serve. So that's one, I think, a bit more thinking about as we go forward with this, but I don't think we should lose that, please, Sue. Thank you.
It's called global burden of disease, isn't it, Professor Ward? Councillor Bradwell.
Yeah, I quite agree with you, John, but I do think you have to speak in the language of the people who we're going out to try and get feedback from, because if we go out telling people that smoking's bad for them, I'm sure they possibly think that. But I think it's a bit like got to get I suppose it's just changing mindsets, and how do you do that? But I think you're right and I think the document's very good, and it is something that people perhaps would read in a GP surgery. Sometimes you pick things up and you think, that's not interesting. But I think things like, it does hit you. I thought pictures were pretty good, but happy to change some of them. But do you know what I mean? But I do think it is that how you go about messaging to actually get people to think about what we're saying. And it's the same with pregnant women, isn't it? And smoking, and not eating the right foods and that can be very difficult if you're on a very, very low wage or whatever. But I do think that's what we need to do, but I think it needs some thinking about, because Lincolnshire's very big, so we've got different areas. We've got the coast, we've got Lincoln City, then we've got go down to Bourne, Stamford, very nice, middle class area. So I think you would need to tailor it for where you wanted to go into as well. But I think it's worth doing.
I think there's a great point, Tricia, and perhaps we do need to get our comms experts to help us with all this. But the idea of sort of tailoring it to local communities or geographies, I think, is a smart one as well. So again, we'll kind of put that into the pot, shall we, for our leads to think about for us. Might be worth almost doing, I don't know, our district council sort of footprints as well. But okay, one to keep discussing. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? We'll move to the actions then, which are to note the refreshed strategy, note the proposal to undertake a more fundamental review of the strategy following the publication of the needs assessment, and alongside the development of the ICS, there's a lot of strategies, and note and comment on the proposals to reinvigorate the governance and delivery arrangements as set out in section 1.3. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Now move on to item 7C, which is the Lincolnshire Ageing Better Rural Strategic Partnership Update. And I'm going to invite Samantha Neal and Navaz Sutton to present the report, and welcome to you today. And then any questions after their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's about 2 years, I think, since we last came to Health and Wellbeing Board to talk about this particular partnership. It was in its infancy, and I always feel like I ought to declare an interest and also make an apology. The Centre for Ageing Better predominantly focuses on the 50-plus age group. It's not specifically about people who are elderly. It's about ageing well as our population and as we as individuals move into later life. So there's my apology and my declaration of interest at the outset. The partnership that we have with Centre for Ageing Better is one of 3 nationally, the other 2 partners being Greater Manchester and Leeds. And the interest that Centre for Ageing Better had in working with us is that we are predominantly rural and coastal. More to come on that in this year's DPH report. But I think in terms of being part of the National What Works network, Ageing Better are looking to work with stakeholders to influence government thinking. So the relationship gives us a direct link into learning from other parts of the country and other parts of the world, but also gives us in Lincolnshire a voice back into central government and policymakers around the areas that we're looking at here. So back in 2020, we were quite busy with COVID, but we did sign the MOU, and we have moved forward so that we're just coming up to our 2nd annual review in the next week or so of the partnership. It has been in some ways a fairly slow start. We had a change of manager and COVID obviously intervened, but we now have quite a proactive work programme coming forward, and I'm really pleased that Naz is here this afternoon just to pull out 1 or 2 key highlights. So what we're asking you to do is to be aware of the partnership, to note the work that's in hand at the moment and the progress. Think about how maybe your organisation might want to interact with the steering group and the work that's in hand, and think about areas where perhaps we can come in and do a little bit more promotion around the work that's taking place. And I'm going to ask Naz just to pull out 2 or 3 highlights from the work that's taking place at the moment.
Thank you, Sam. So I've got the pleasure of picking up on a couple of highlights. Now you've got the full report, so obviously I won't work through the whole report, but really wanted to pick up on the Good Homes Alliance project, which has come out of the Good Homes Inquiry recommendations. So a national report that came out. Lincolnshire are actually leading the way. We are the first and only county that are piloting that recommendation. And as Sam mentioned, we are taking that learning back to national rollout and how we can influence other areas. We've done some public engagement around that as a start point. And since this report was written, we've actually finished the next phase, which was the define phase, and we're already well underway with the develop phase. That define phase actually saw over 1,000 respondents to the survey. I think it says about 500 in the report, so we've doubled that. We actually got 68 practitioners to contribute, over 35 organisations, 100 individual face-to-face conversations, and so on. And tomorrow, the final part of that is we have managed to pull together a group of 10 as a reference group that are going to continue to help us shape this as public voice from Lincolnshire. Then if I move down and on, you can see there's some themes that have come out. And just to clarify, in terms of those themes, they have been streamlined. And in the latest report, which we can share with you, you can see how those themes are developing. Moving on to the next area, which is the work and employment area. the main thing I wanted to pick up here is it mentions in there about an employer pledge, an age-friendly employer pledge, a national pledge that's been launched. It actually launched last week, as it says November in that report. And I'm pleased to say that for the launch, we actually had the ICB and Lincolnshire Co-op sign up pre-launch. So they got plenty of promotion around that. But since that point of launch last week, we've also got Lincolnshire County Council and Boston College that have committed to sign up as well, which is 4 from Lincolnshire. I think there's only about 32 organisations signed up currently, so obviously leading the way there. So again, that is something to help our employers, and we talked earlier about MSK and the impact it has on early retirement. We're actually providing an age-friendly environment for employment can help with some of that, and that's kind of the journey they are going on. So great work from Lincolnshire, and hopefully we can drive that forward even more. Probably to mention with that, there is a real interest from the Ageing Better around SMEs. Lincolnshire have a lot of SMEs, and the employer pledge generally requires some kind of capacity around HR with what they want to embed. So they're doing some exploratory work in January, February and March with SMEs from Lincolnshire to understand what they maybe need. So again, we maybe get some benefit from there, but also inform national work and rollout. And then the last thing I'd like to pick up on is the recent conference we had as well at the end of September. A successful conference, received really good engagement on the day, but also helped us really identify some of the challenges around our ageing population. And when we talk about the ageing population, obviously we are talking about the 50 plus, those preparing for later life. So we identified a number of challenges, but some of the key highlights that were coming out around what we can do going forward. And there was talk around counsellor engagement and support, and it's good to see we've got a counsellor here with a portfolio around healthy ageing, but maybe we could have more of that as we go forward. There was a joint commitment across all district areas to have a joint comms approach around tackling ageism, which fits into all of our tackling inequalities work. And there'll be a national campaign released next year, towards the back end of next year, and again Lincolnshire can link into that. And as part of that work, there was also the commitment to look at a state of ageing report for Lincolnshire to really understand the needs of residents going forward. So that's kind of the key highlights from there. So I'd like to hand back over to Sam.
So the position we're at the moment, as Naz says, is that we held a very successful first year conference. We are planning to do that next year at the same time, so end of September. That will lead into the annual review next December, and then to an update report to this committee again as we move forward. But happy to take comments and questions and have conversation offline as well if there are things we can pick up from the report today.
Thank you both. Questions? Anyone? I suppose the thing that I would just like to check out, bearing in mind I'm long past that line, let's say, it's around the workforce, and I'm looking at Neil in particular here. What are we doing as far as, I suppose once upon a time it would be called career changes, but that re-educating the workforce to, as it were, have a second wind in a different direction? What are we doing as far as further education is concerned, and linking that in, but for older, more mature students?
I think at the moment the key relationship with us is with the GLEP, and making sure that we're understanding those needs, but also picking up the education sector within that. And particularly, I think the focus of the pledge is very much about employers looking at the workforce they have now and thinking about those changes and adaptations. And I think almost any of our organisations, if you look at the workforce profile, there are a lot of us who fall into the 45-50 age bracket. So there's some real issues in here about retaining skill sets, but also thinking about those change cultures. We are linking quite closely with Lincoln University as well. And again, I think some of this is about our own self-limitations as well. I think quite a lot of us, as we start to get older, think think we might not be able to do things. Or so I think the ageism piece of work is really interesting, because part of that has to tackle the things that we say to ourselves about ageing, as well as the images that we see around us and the opportunities. But certainly through the GLEP is the way that we're approaching both SMEs, training providers, and casting that net wide.
Thank you. Any further questions? John?
Yeah, thanks, Sam and Navaz. Appreciate everything that you've brought to us this afternoon. So 2 thoughts are in my mind. First is just how this dovetails in with the sort of ageing well bit we were discussing earlier with the JSNA and the health and wellbeing strategy, and then also how that chains into the draft integrated care strategy, because it seems to me it's absolutely connected in there. And the second thing is, I understand that we've had this for a couple of years now, but obviously the pandemic been difficult to sort of really get mobilised as you'd have wished to in normal circumstances. I think for me it's just something about the metrics that we're shooting for in all of this as well. So, as this programme goes forward, how many people in Lincolnshire will be getting what sort of benefit when as a result of the programme going forward. So whether that's being retained in the workforce or receiving some better support that will enable them to do something. So I'm just not, the conferences, the strategy, the work is clearly very impressive. And I think it's great that Lincolnshire's leading the way on this, given our comparatively older population compared to most of the rest of the country. I'm just not clear in my own mind on the the precise metrics. Yeah, the so what question. Yeah, thanks, Sam.
So I think we'll see that in a couple of different ways. So this is a 5-year programme, and I think the first couple of years there's been a lot of building the partnership, building that sense of, is there a consensus around here? The focus, I think, for the next 12 months now is twofold. It's Lincolnshire Voice. What is it that people really need and need to be different? And the stats. And I think the State of Ageing report, there's a national tool for that now that Lincolnshire has worked to look at, to support the development of that tool. So that will start to give us some of that baseline. But in terms of very specific pieces of work, one of the sessions we focused on at the conference was around changes that we as an employer, as County Council, are making across our policies, our practices, and picking that up as part of our equalities agenda, which sits under Glenn as the Exec Director. So we will start to be building a baseline now across our organisation about, is that making any difference to our employees? Are we retaining more people? Are we gaining people? Are we shifting to more part-time working, etc.? So some of this is taking a little bit of time to build up. I think the final 2 years of the programme, so next year, very much that, what does this look like and what do we need to do? The final 2 years we see as being quite a detailed delivery plan that starts to do exactly that on a bigger scale. Derek, did you? Yeah. Derek.
Just in terms of how we locate it with what we were just talking about, I think the work we're doing, Centre for Ageing Better, is great, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we are the national rural partner, which is really important. But when you look at the size of the programme compared to the county council, the district councils, the NHS, it's tiny. So I think what we've got to do is develop the work, understand what some of the implications are, and then embed it in things like the health and wellbeing strategy, if that's what the people of Lincolnshire think is important, embed it into the integrated care partnership strategy, and then start to act on the issues that we see there. That's how we'll see a fundamental, we'll start to see a shift, because this in and of itself is fantastic, and it is a real jewel in the crown for Lincolnshire, but it is only a very small amount of money and a small programme compared to the greater spend that we've got, and there's a lot of learning we've got to take and embed. Otherwise it'll be something that's been really interesting for those who've been involved, but then it will just sit on the shelf, and that's exactly what we don't want to do with it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, can we now move to the actions required? That we note the work in hand and the progress to date, that we consider the opportunities to engage with the steering group and its work programme, and that we consider how to promote the Lincolnshire Ageing Better Rural Strategic Partnership with the wider health and care system, and identify appropriate colleagues to connect with the strategic partnership manager. All agreed? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Anyone disagreeing? Anyone abstaining? Thank you. Move to paper 8A, which is the Lincolnshire Drug and Alcohol Partnership. Derek, did you want to say something first?
Just by way of introduction, this is the, we have to have a combating drugs partnership, is the national term. And through that process, we have to have a senior responsible officer. I'm sure that it's not responsible, is it? Owner, sorry, an SRO, but it's not this. I am that person for Lincolnshire. I'm also that person for North and North East Lincolnshire, and in the north it feeds into the Humber model. Lucy is leading this on behalf of us in Lincolnshire, so that's just by way of context. The key point here really is for the Home Office and central government to have a single line of sight for the combating drugs partnership around all of the 10-year strategy and the delivery of the new 10-year strategy, which we've talked about before. So Lucy's just going to give an update on where we are with it.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. So as Derek's mentioned, we have a 10-year drug strategy which was released a year ago, actually, by national government, called From Harm to Hope. And in February of this year, the government announced significant extra funding to support the delivery of that strategy, so £780 million nationally over the first 3 years. In the summer of this year, drug strategy guidance for local areas was released by national government, effectively strongly steering local areas as to how national government would like us to deliver that national strategy at a local level. And the Combating Drugs Partnership was the kind of the proposal for what we should be establishing locally to support our joined up working around drugs and alcohol prevention and treatment. And in Lincolnshire, we've called our kind of Combating Drugs Partnership the Drug and Alcohol Partnership. We met as a group for the first time in September, and we've got good representation from across a range of organisations, agencies that you would want to see around the table. So we have colleagues from across health, from the Integrated Care Board, from police, probation, the secure estate, children's services, adult social care, the Job Centre Plus. A wide range of partners have engaged in the work, which has been really, really good, because what it's enabled us to do from the outset is have really broad conversations around how we can support across Lincolnshire in terms of both prevention of kind of harm and the development of kind of risky and harmful behaviours, right through to a robust kind of treatment service, and how we can support people who are in recovery to stay in recovery and help them to kind of reintegrate into different aspects of society. We have a number of milestones to hit. So the first in August was around agreeing a geographical footprint. I think there are 44 drug and alcohol partnerships nationally. Lincolnshire is, we are lucky in many respects in that we are coterminous with our Integrated Care Board, with our police force, etc. So that, I think that will help us locally. We have Derek as our senior responsible owner. We've developed our terms of reference. We have our governance. We report in through the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership governance structure. And at the moment, well, we've just finished a local needs assessment, which draws very heavily on the joint strategic needs assessment that I talked about earlier, which has a chapter on drug and alcohol. But we've also used other local intelligence, for example, the drug market profile that was completed in 2021 by Lincolnshire Police. And we are currently developing a local action plan and a performance framework to help us measure our progress against that action plan over the next year. We are new, we're still finding our feet, but I think we have made good progress to date, and we are on track to hit all of those national government milestones on time. We've identified some gaps locally which are being prioritised within our local action plan, particularly around all age prevention, particularly for alcohol. We already have an existing Lincolnshire drug strategy which covers illegal drugs and kind of prevention and treatment of illegal drugs quite comprehensively, but there's more work that we could be doing around alcohol prevention, and so that's one of our areas of focus. Another is dual diagnosis, so for individuals who have co-occurring mental ill health and substance misuse, making sure that we've got good support in place for those individuals. And also supporting people in recovery into employment, and that's one of the reasons we work very closely with the Job Centre Plus. There are some others as well, but they're some of our key priorities for now. And so the ask really today was to come along and give you an update, to ask for the board to note the progress that we've made locally in developing our partnership, and to perhaps to suggest that we come back in maybe a year's time to update on the work that we've delivered, and to think about kind of next steps. So thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Can I just check, the Vice Chairman, Andrew McWatt, which organisation is Andrew from?
Lincolnshire Police.
That answers the question, because I was going to say to Julia, I don't see Lincolnshire Police on here at all. So that's great. Thanks very much indeed. Any other questions at all? Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Chairman. I was pleased to hear then the comment relating drug and alcohol abuse to mental health. And that's the fact is, although it's a drug and alcohol strategy, hopefully there is that clear crossover into, because if people haven't got mental health issues to start with, they quite often develop them through the abuse of substances. But the other thing is that that we're not seeing in there is with regards to education, that quite often a very early intervention and actually a role for schools to play in early education with regards to substance abuse. I mean, on top of the fact that county lines means that we've still got young people that are both victims and abusers. So the fact is, we think perhaps there's a role there to play to make sure that we're joining all the dots.
Yeah, absolutely, I would agree. So we work very closely with colleagues in public protection around the Stay Safe Partnership, which is one of our very early intervention, kind of primary, what we'd call early prevention work for alcohol and illegal drugs, which goes into primary and secondary school, but the conversation around drugs and alcohol and county lines and keeping yourself safe is focused in secondary school. So we are linking closely with that team, but also thinking about that's great because it goes in and it starts the conversation with young people, but how do we make sure that they've got the space to continue that conversation, and particularly picking up on young people who are particularly vulnerable, how can we make sure that that support is in place for them? So we work very closely with We Are With You, who are our specialist treatment provider. They actually deliver some of the Stay Safe, the drug and alcohol specific content in school, so they start to build those relationships. But absolutely, you're right. I think within our prevention focus, it is about how do we make sure that we've got I suppose almost like a multifaceted approach to that prevention in young people, because there will be some who are homeschooled, for example, or not in kind of that, not exposed to those Stay Safe sessions. So it's really important that we do have that rounded approach.
Thank you. Tricia.
Yes. Well, I don't very often get excited about pieces of work, but I really think, and I've got confidence that we're going to make a difference this time, because we have had drugs and the prevention side of drugs on the table at certain points. I remember going up to police headquarters and having a presentation there from senior police officer and that. But this time, I think because it's under the Safe Lincolnshire Partnership, that partnership does draw in so many partners, and they are around the table, the key players. And I just think, I've just got a bit of confidence that we are going to go somewhere this time, and we have to, because if you look at, we're looking at serious violence. Well, drugs and alcohol and all that play into that. And, you know, and as we've just mentioned about schools, and yes, the Stay Safe partnership go into schools all the time. And I mean, that's something we've been offering for a number of years, but drugs is definitely, you know, on that agenda with lots of other things that, you know, young people can become involved in and that. So I just do think it is something that I believe we've got to grasp the nettle this time, because actually drugs, I know we were talking the other day about actually people who are rough sleeping again and that, and, you know, those are people, you know, probably high on drugs. They are high on drugs and alcohol and that. And actually, you know, everybody needs some sort of help. I know people often refuse help, but I do think, yeah, this is somewhere I think that we have to succeed with. So, yeah, I mean, we can bring reports back, you know, every year or whatever, but I do think, you know, it's, I just think we've all got a part to play in this. So, yeah, so just really happy.
Thank you, Tricia. Derek.
It's really just to build on what Councillor Bradwell said, that I think it's really important that we've got this. It's clearly still a focus for government. It's one of those few things that seems to have carried through, and Public Protection Board's the right place for this to sit into, but a lot of the wider issues are going to touch on or be fundamental issues around health and care or housing or some of the other areas that fit within the Health and Wellbeing Board's remit. So I guess as the person that the Home Office have got the name and telephone number for, I'm really asking for the support of everybody around this table. And I think, as Lucy was saying, a dual diagnosis is something someone and I spoke about 5 years ago. We've tested it out in Lincoln, and it has worked pretty well, but we've got to mainstream it, and we've got to embed it, and that's something that we can't do from a council perspective. We've got to do it at a system level. Otherwise, we're going to have people keep coming around the system. So I think, as well as us coming back annually, I think it's being held to account here as well, and also asking for help and support from partners around the Health and Wellbeing Board is going to be really important if we are going to do, as Councillor Bradwell said, deliver on this strategy in Lincolnshire.
Thank you. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you. I'd just like to support the remarks that Richard and Derek have made, particularly about dual diagnosis. I think as the changing pattern in drug misuse that's taking place, it's increasing the problem of dual diagnosis and increasing the numbers of mental health patients with that situation. And looking at this, I recall when I joined the NHS in mental health services back in the 80s, we had, for example, one community psychiatric nurse covering the Grantham area, specialising in drug and alcohol misuse, and it's grown exponentially since then in terms of the problem. So I think anything that can be done, particularly to target dual diagnosis, is to be very beneficial and needs maximum support.
Thank you. Lucy, I don't know whether it's appropriate or not, but there isn't anyone, a representative from the nighttime economy, licensees, I don't quite, or I know my language, but bouncer association or whatever you might want to call it.
Yeah. So the nighttime economy, actually, I'm thinking about, as Councillor Bradwell said, kind of situating this work under the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. Had a conversation the other day with a colleague in the police who chairs the Reducing Reoffending core priority group, which is one of the groups that sits alongside the Drug and Alcohol Partnership. And the nighttime economy is one of their priority areas as well. So we've agreed we're gonna start conversations. So although we don't have anyone sat on the group, there will be a number of different areas where we think we need to have a specific task and finish group around this potentially. So the nighttime economy is one of those that we've flagged, and there will be others as we move forward. So it's definitely on the list.
Thank you. Heather.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of jump back to schools and really affirm to Derek in terms of my commitment in our interface with schools, because I think schools are really powerful in this part, and beyond the Stay Safe days, all schools have a requirement to deliver the national curriculum, which includes drugs and alcohol education, and all schools in Lincolnshire are doing that, and yet we've still got challenges and we've still got problems. And I know schools are really committed to working with us on this. So again, just thinking about where you can get most impact for your funding is if you can get a programme that schools can then deliver on your behalf, you touch an awful lot more children and young people. And I think it's worth engaging with them to see what they're already delivering. You know, are we having more impact in some parts of the county or not? And we'd be happy to get involved and support with that. But I think they're a really important piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. That would be really good to pick up on.
You could come to the head teacher briefing and meet with the head teachers.
Yes, please. That would be great. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. Just again to offer my absolute support for this piece of work, and just as a bit of assurance really in terms of the dual diagnosis piece, that there is read across from Lucy's group over to the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Alliance group, where we've had assurance report on dual diagnosis. And it's just to make the point really that some small investments in We Are With You workers in A&E, for example, makes a massive difference in terms of getting the right care at the right level, at the right time when people are in that crisis. And just a quick question really around potential input from YMCA and other homeless providers. So I don't know whether that's been considered. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So we do have a colleague from the districts representing us around homelessness, but we haven't to date engaged with YMCA. There are a number of different organisations that we will need to engage with over time, perhaps not in the partnership, but again in that kind of offshoots around specific. So people at risk of homelessness or homelessness is one of those areas where we've got some additional specific funding for the next 2 years, and there is a separate kind of subgroup that's looking at that. So I think that's one area. The other, just coming back to dual diagnosis, is that there is a specific group that we have in Lincolnshire that does focus on dual diagnosis, again, that sits as a bit of a side group. It's like a group underneath the partnership. So this is there's a lot of different dimensions to our work to prevent and treat drug and alcohol misuse. And I think the partnership's great because it enables us to bring all the strategic partners together in one space, but there's a lot of conversations for us to have across the system, across all ages, really, to make sure we've got that comprehensive approach and make the most of this opportunity and the additional funding that's coming our way.
Thank you, Lucy. Any further questions, anyone? No? Okay, can I take you to the actions required, and that's to that we note the establishment of the Lincolnshire Drug and Alcohol Partnership and the progress made by the partnership to date, and that we agree to receive annual updates on the progress of the partnerships. Can we have a show of hands in agreement? Anyone disagreeing? Any abstentions? Thank you. We now move on to item 8B, which is the action log of previous decisions. This is just for noting. I don't propose to go through it, but I do need a show of hands to show that you agree. Thank you. Anyone disagree? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. And then the forward plan, item 8C. Again, I don't propose to go through it, but I would like your agreement with a show of hands, but also just to say if there's something that you would like bringing to put on the forward plan, then please get in touch with Alison and we'll make arrangements. So can I have a show of hands? Thank you. Any disagreement? Any abstentions? No. Okay. Thank you for that. Great time, but Yeah, but there's a bit of a downside because, of course, we can't start the next meeting until 3:30 because of it having to go out to the public. So if you'd like to go and get a drink, at least it's better this way, isn't it, than the other. Go into the members and there's a coffee machine there, so please go and help yourselves. And then back in here, I don't know, 25